next season is going to be a big one for LSU, especially with this note. Like, all of this stuff that's happening right now is going to roll over into next season for LSU. Like, this is all going to add stress to game number 1 against Clemson because, you drop that football game the same way the media storm began for LSU after the USC loss. It's going to be that times 10.
Oh, yeah.
You drop another one to Clemson already, plus Notre Dame's success this past year, it's only going to add fuel to that fire. It's adding more pressure and more pressure and more pressure to this week 1 game against Clemson.
Yeah, you have to. First of all, you put this pressure on yourself. You have to get off the schneid. I don't care. I don't think Notre Dame, regardless of what happens with them, that does add fuel to the fire. But just from a strictly LSU perspective, this shit has to stop happening. It just feels like every year you line yourself up behind the 8 ball after week 1,
right?
And it feels like these losses haven't mattered that much. But just to get off the schneid would feel great to start off 1-0 instead of 0-1 every year. But I think this game probably holds as much weight as maybe his first game against Florida State, to where, what do you really have here? Let's see. And you would want to see, especially all the things that you did in the portal, reloaded your roster, absolutely rehabbed it to where you put 16 guys, you grabbed 16 different players around the country, put them on your roster. LSU is going to be a talking point, and that is going to be the biggest topic of conversation outside of Brian Kelly.
Right.
It's going to be like, okay, you did all of this at the portal. Week 1, it will be judged fairly or unfairly as either a success or failure starting week 1, and then people will reassess in week 5. But you have to think that they would want to, because the jokes are already out there. If you lose week 1 to Clemson, a team that habitually doesn't get in the portal, has dabbled a little bit, and now it would be like, oh, LSU tried to buy a roster. It's all the same narrative. And if you lose week 1, it's like, oh, that was all for naught. And regardless of if it makes a difference or not, the fan base will have the forks out.
Oh, yes.
It will be, what did I pay for? Because you publicly decreed, we're poor, pass the hat. And so now LSU fans are going to feel just that little bit more entitled to say something because I helped build this team. I'm canceling my subscription.
Yeah, no, and I
want Netflix back.
And it's going to be, when it comes to schedule-wise, you're going to Clemson week 1. Then week 3, you have Florida at home, who beat you last year, who's going to have DJ Lagway, who will probably be one of the hottest names at quarterback in the country. You go to Oxford in week 5. It'll be your 5th straight football game. You're going to Oxford, which you haven't won in Oxford since when?
19
was the last time you won in Oxford?
Yeah, that was the John Reese Plumlee game.
Yep.
When you were up big at around half, and then
Plumlee
was like, "This game isn't over
just
yet."
Sort of running all over.
The LSU was in turfs on the sidelines.
That was the biggest knock against LSU's defense in 2019. Was that game? People constantly use that as the calling card.
The measuring stick for
the defense isn't that good. Look what they gave up to Ole Miss.
You're up 30 in the cold, and everybody was trying to keep their jacket on.
Right.
My cleats are off, coach. Taped off. You go back out there. It's like, they're not going to win.
No, it's over already.
We got Burrow.
But that's the last time LSU won in Oxford, so that's obviously going to be a tough matchup. Then you have a bye week, and then you have South Carolina at home, who has Lenore Sellers, probably another guy he's probably going to be in the Heisman conversation early in the season, just as one of the guys, a dark horse or something like that because of his performance this past year. Then you're going to Nashville to take on Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. And then obviously you have A&M at home, bye week, to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama, Arkansas at home. Then the final week of the season, you're going to Norman, Oklahoma. So the schedule, these bye weeks, not these bye weeks, these away games are going to be tough. To Clemson, to Oxford, to Vanderbilt, to Alabama, to Oklahoma. Those are going to be big-time games away from home that you're going to have to go and make happen. But
unless we forget, Vanderbilt, the greatest home field advantage of all time.
Yes.
Just cranes in the background, construction everywhere. It's hard to focus.
Everywhere. Will they have a goalpost?
No one knows. Moving them.
They keep flying around, going into rivers. But I like the schedule, but the pressure's going to be on. And like Lloyd said, on top of the discourse around Notre Dame and the fact that you haven't won an opener in all these years, on top of that is the fact that you've proven you're all in this season. That adds to the pressure on week one, is because you've spent money. You've got, like Lloyd said, the fans have donated money. You've filled out your roster. You've had probably the most successful off season in his time at LSU, at least from just looking at it perspective, like where people are looking at LSU and seeing what they're doing.
And ranking season, you finished out number one as the off-season favorite, which I'm still obviously this speaks to what the roster was last year and how LSU was still able to cobble together 9 wins. If you go and replace 16 people, it feels like maybe you didn't have the talent in the building, which, I mean, it goes without saying that still falls on LSU. But the addition of Austin Thomas and being able to kind of assess this transfer portal, and I'd imagine that was his job throughout the year, was trying to put together what do we need, what pieces could I possibly go scout. You start advanced scouting these guys and figure out it's the opposite of what Mickey Loomis is doing. You start looking throughout the years, okay, it feels like who's leaving? Feels like we might need a safety, we might need a corner, we might, offensive line help. You knew some of the woes going into the year, so you start putting together your wish list throughout the year, and having a guy purely devoted just to that, which it feels like Austin Thomas's job is kind of like GM, where he's got the whiteboard with the magnets on it, he's shifting names and wish lists. Yeah, he's minority reporting this whole thing.
Right.
And that's why you brought him in. So that's why you get to 16, because they did it rather quickly. You're starting to see some of these other names kind of trickle in, but LSU was all in from the get, and that was something that even kind of surprised Brian Kelly. He's like, I thought we would get to 15. I didn't think we would get there this quickly. Yeah. So it's a testament to how they want to build it. But that said, this is also your last pivot, Brian.
Yes.
Because you're one more and you're traveling. You've used up all your steps. We've gone from we have to recruit. Well, your first bullet was a blank with your restructuring of the staff and who you put where. All-time Icarus move. Buddy, I don't think you know how this works. No, I do. Watch this. And then you're back here with us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then you go year 2, you rearrange the staff, you do some things to mitigate your losses on the recruiting trail, and then there's still the fallout from Matt House from becoming a Burroughs Awards finalist to get that out of town
in a year
is remarkable. Because,
unbelievable.
I mean, I think it was pretty much general consensus. Don't let him leave.
Yeah,
because there was conversations about where Matt House was well, the defense was pretty good. You have to keep him around. Then it goes to, Buddy mailed it in.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened, but that defense was atrocious. Cost you a potential national championship, and now you reshuffle from all of our efforts are in recruiting to I have a new staff. Then you see what happens with the recruiting in that staff, where you're in play for these big names,
right?
And obviously the Bryce Underwood situation happens, and it's a pivot to, recruiting's nice, but you have to add these guys that are ready to play now.
Right.
So this is our third iteration of what Brian Kelly thinks his game plan is at LSU.
And I like this game plan.
We'll see.
Right. We'll see how it turns out.
It looks great on paper.
Yeah, well, to me, money-wise, it's the better solution because from what I've seen, transfer portal players are cheaper than high school players. At least the way that the media has portrayed it, that the money going into these high school contracts, these guys coming out of high school was a little bit more than these guys you're getting from the portal. But it's going to be big pressure, and we've seen LSU success in the portal, like Lloyd said, and the most recent comes with Tamarcus Cooley, the NC State defensive back, committing to LSU. LSU fans and us in the media, sitting here talking to this microphone, we've been calling for a safety. Needed a safety. You saw a poor defensive backfield performance from LSU in the bowl game, where they gave up 500 yards to a Baylor offense that was playing better, but still not a team that you should give 500 yards to. And although they did a lot of bend, don't break, they made plays happen, they did better things, you still knew you were going to need some defensive backfield help, especially in the safety room, because Sage Ryan and Major Burns were two guys that played the majority of the reps at those positions, and they're both going to be gone. So you're going to need something to add to that in addition to Deshaun Spears, Jordan Gilbert, and then obviously the move of Toviano to safety, which we saw in the bowl game, which wasn't bad. But now you add another piece into Marcus Cooley, who at NC State wasn't strictly a safety. He did play 39 of his, 93 snaps? Or he had 93 snaps in the box, 101 along the edge of the defensive line as a rusher, and he only had 39 snaps as a free safety. At NC State, he was almost exclusively used as a nickel corner, but it will be a nice piece for Blake Baker to have as he's 5'11", 200. He's not this big, imposing figure, but he has shown that he's got good feel. He's got instincts. When he was in, some of those zone coverages, he looked well. But it's going to be something for Blake Baker and this defensive staff to work with. So it's going to be another nice piece in that defensive backfield along with a guy like Mansour Delane where you have some versatility. You can move him around. You can get creative. You can do different things. So even if the talent level isn't that of what you kind of expected, you can still be creative enough and versatile enough that you can move him around and do some creative things with him. As Blake Baker, Corey Raymond, Jake Olson, and the defensive backfield room. But to me, when you add guys like Jakeem Jackson, Mansour Delane, to Marcus Cooley, to go along with a guy like DJ Pickett, Aiden Anding, some of these other defensive backs you got in recruiting, you've really been able to build the defensive backfield room in the way that you wanted when you brought Corey Raymond back. Like, this is what you were expecting, obviously, at the cornerback room. But now you're giving guys like Blake Baker, Jake Olson, some safeties to really work with and to continue to grow in the backfield so that you're not giving up 500 yards to Baylor. So the pressure is definitely going to be on because the things that were your knocks coming out of the bowl game, which that's a heck of a play. Right there.
I am because everybody has kind of like linchpinned him at safety,
right?
And now when you look at what the numbers bear out, he played nickel,
right?
And so if you're LSU, obviously this is the portal speculation has gotten so far
right
out of people are just grasping at everything that you could put in front of them, and I don't blame them because nobody knows anything as of now because there was the report of LSU is waiting for one of these teams in the playoffs that has a silent commit, and you keep wondering who that is, and then you see, TaMarcus Cooley's a great get, but he doesn't play safety really.
Right.
And so the same thing with Mansour Delane. You have guys that can play that spot, but you still yet to go and get a verified safety. And while you have some on the roster, like at some point, and I said this yesterday, you have to start trusting who you evaluated and recruited and brought in, whether that like a Deshaun Spears. At some point, like you have to stop saying he's a young guy. He's been here for 2 years. This is going on his third, right? Redshirt sophomore.
No, he was a
freshman. At some
point,
will be
his
sophomore year, true sophomore year.
Yeah.
Oh, who was I thinking of? Matthews? I don't know. Either way, true sophomore.
Yeah.
But got reps, and I think if you give him another full year of practice, conditioning, all of those things, like at some point you'd expect him to be able to step up and play because the talent is immense.
Yes. No, 100%. And I am excited to see what it looks like in spring ball, like to kind of see where they pencil in some of these guys, especially in the defensive backfield. That'll probably be one of the biggest storylines going into spring football is where does Mansour Delane line up? Where's TaMarcus Cooley going to play? Who are the safeties in that group? Because obviously your starting safeties going into last year, you saw Jordan Allen getting in the mix, and now he's he hit the transfer portal. Kylan Jackson was a name of somebody that you were expecting to continue to get more reps, and he hits the portal as well. And so it's rebuilding that room. And I think Jordan Gilbert is still going to very much be in the mix. I thought he looked well in the bowl game. Now, he was flying around a bit more than he was playing free safety. Like, he was more of getting around the ball, getting downhill, not as much in coverage.
That's where he shines.
And that's who he is. You know, he's not a coverage free safety. Now, can he grow there over this offseason and work with Olsen and Baker and Raymond and get there 100%? I mean, if he does that, that would be huge for LSU. But you've seen him play so well when he's downhill. He's making tackles. He's able to fly around and hit.
Yeah, the coverage is not his strong suit.
No.
And to give him, like, I don't want to knock the guy, but to give him a little bit of credence, which usually doesn't happen. He played with a bum shoulder, but this is the third year where that shoulder's given him issues.
Right.
And he also played with a broken hand. So he was somebody that gutted it out for you plays when when he probably didn't have to, or could have said, I'm good, but still went out there and played. And now he's coming back to LSU, a Louisiana kid that you hope gets better. But that's where I can see that people want to add an actual safety from the portal, just because you want depth at the position and you want competition at the position.
Yeah, and I mean, and
everybody keeps saying Derek Williams from Texas.
That's the name that I was asked about it 3 times yesterday. You know, like I got to we played a basketball game at Rummel, and I guess the conversation got stirred up yesterday about it, where some people were talking about it, where I was asked, you know, is Derek Williams coming to LSU? So I was like, I have no idea. I was like, I've probably heard the same exact things you're hearing, where maybe. And obviously the window is open for you get how many days after bowl law? Is it 10-day window after you lose?
It's 5 or 10.
5, it's something like that. And so if it's 5, I think the window's closed. If it's 10, it would still be open because they lost on Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Today would be the 5th day. So if it's 10 days, it's open. If it's 5 days, today would be the final day that window is open after the bowl game. So would he be a massive get if LSU is able to pull him from Texas? Yes, but he was a contributor early on at Texas, a team that was in the college football playoff the last 2 seasons. And so, Sabrion and Cordell say 5. So today would be the final day of that window. So if his name hits the portal, I would say LSU is probably the favorite. But if it doesn't, it doesn't, and you've got what you've got. Now, there is a spring portal window, which we'll kind of see what LSU needs, you know, in spring football and where some of these guys end up position-wise. But I would almost expect Deshaun Spears and Jordan Gilbert to probably be your 2 at safety, and once we get to spring football.
Yeah, the spring portal window opens April 16th to the 25th, and that's where LSU was. That's where they tried to make their hay last year in the portal after
D tackles, and
it was all retention based, where Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo were coming back for sure. We're retending them,
right?
And then they were both gone, so you weren't active at all in the first transfer portal window. Then you realize, like, oh wait, this spring portal window, these guys are really asking for money because they know that your ass is desperate.
Yeah, and you need them more than they need you.
And so kudos to LSU for jumping into this portal window and kind of figuring that part out as well, because last year it was, we're going to wait around and see. And then when you got to you went to the bargaining table, like, why is inflation so high?
Right.
Like, it's like shopping in California or New York. Like, what happened? And so now that LSU is able to kind of shop earlier,
right,
you're not as desperate as you were last year, and you might still have a little set aside for somebody you might maybe really need.
I mean, you can still make a move on 1 or 2 in that spring window because you're able to you're able to set that money aside to be prepared for, okay, we're probably going to need a guy at this spot and this spot. You know, obviously you're not going to go get any SEC caliber guys because you're not able to transfer in conference during the spring window. But you would still be able to answer some of the questions you may have found up until that point. But I would assume LSU has got their defensive back room finished, and I would say that would be the safest assumption. And I would assume Spears and Gilbert are going to be the guys that get the starts there, because to me, I would love to see Cooley grow and become a safety, but right now, at NC State he wasn't one, like Lloyd said, and so I wouldn't pencil him in to be one day one. That was him at nickel.
Ripped it.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the tools.
We're about to get, hold on, 3, 2, 1, target engaged sniper.
But yeah, I mean, like he fits the aggressive style that Blake Baker's going to want to play. He's got that mindset. He's going to fit well in this defense. It just comes down to the position. Where is he going to be penciled in at in the lineup? We shall see. I would assume it's not going to be at safety just because he hasn't really done it yet. But if he's able to grow and make it happen.
Not all plays are highlights.
Yep. I would love to see him there because he's got these physical tools and kind of the mentality of what you would want from a guy at that spot. So I'm excited, but I'm also interested to see what Blake Baker does with these guys position-wise, because there's a lot of corners, a lot of guys that are versatile. Who ends up being a safety? Who ends up staying at corner? Who's your nickel? Who's this? Who's that?
And regardless, it's hard to look at the roster last year and this year and say you didn't get better.
100%.
So regardless if they're a true safety, if they're a true corner, true nickel, whatever it may be, at least you have people that you feel like you've upgraded in the talent department from what you had previously. And whether it's people hitting the portal or graduating, wherever, you had to assess needs regardless. And it feels like you've upgraded at every position on the defensive side. Certainly, to lose Alexander hurts, but to bring in DJ Pickett doesn't make it that bad. It went from a scar to a scratch. And I think people are excited to see Pickett play and wouldn't be surprised to see him out there day one, rep one, against Clemson, lined up on the outside. I think that's the expectation for him. And then you have Jakeem Jackson, all the other guys that you brought in. You still have Ashton Stamps, by the way.
Yes.
Like team leader in defensive snaps last year, where I don't know if he was – I wouldn't say he was a liability. He definitely – got tested a lot. They went after him a little bit, held his own, and I think playing this amount of snaps from a freshman, sophomore, he's seen it all at this point.
Yeah.
And so I think you'll get a very polished Ashton Stamps going into next year, where you might see him take that jump from kind of fringe corner, like, oh yeah, Stamps is all right, to, okay, Stamps is a player, because this is what Rummel Raiders do.
Yes. Well, and with this defensive staff, the one thing that can be taken into account now is growth and development. Like, that was another – obviously, you brought this staff in to be able to recruit at the top level of college football, but you also brought them in to develop guys at these positions. And I'm excited to see what, comes of Ashton Stamps and how he's able to develop with another – off season with Corey Raymond in that cornerback room. It's that's one of the things you're not going to see the same Stamps that you saw last year. You're not going to see the same Deshaun Spears that you saw in spots last year. Expect Toviano to develop. Like this offseason with this staff is going to be massive for what you get from these guys next season. And spring football can't get here any sooner. Obviously, we're going to do as much spring football coverage as we can for you guys to get y'all as much information as possible.